Welcome everyone. If you like the following video, please remember to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date of new content here on You Create Your Reality. Enjoy the rest of your day and always remember, keep creating.
Now the whole purpose of meditation then is to get beyond the analytical mind and enter the operating system and begin to change these negative or unhealthy habits and behaviors into more productive ones. How many people understand? So, some people have a very thin analytical mind, and because they have a very thin analytical mind, they tend to slip past their conscious mind very naturally. Other people who've had a lot of education and have studied a lot, they have a little thicker analytical mind, and they have to work a little harder to get past it. Are you with me? So is there anything wrong with the analytical mind? No. It's just that you have to know how to get beyond it. So the more analytical you are, the less suggestible you are to your own thoughts. The less analytical you are, the more suggestible you are to your own thoughts. And what I've learned over the years is people are the most suggestible to the thoughts that are equal to their emotional state. If they feel unworthy, they'll accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to that emotional state, and they'll program their autonomic nervous system into that destiny. Which means then they are less suggestible to the thoughts about empowerment and change if they're living by guilt, shame, or unworthiness. Change a person's emotional state into gratitude, into joy, and into freedom, and they'll accept, believe, and surrender to those thoughts equal to their emotional state, and they'll program their autonomic nervous system into a different destiny. And we've measured the epigenetic changes as a result of it. So then, the whole purpose here is to move from high beta into mid-range beta into low-level beta, right past the analytical mind. And the moment that happens, your brain waves change to alpha. And if you do it properly, you'll create very coherent brainwave patterns in alpha, and moving down past the analytical mind into theta, into some deep unconscious levels. So here's my question. If you're sitting in a meditation tomorrow, and you notice that you start getting frustrated or impatient, what brainwave patterns are you moving into? High beta, would you agree? If you're sitting there thinking, when's this going to be over? I don't know if I can do this any longer. I'm tired. When's the bell going to ring? You start thinking that way. Am I doing this right? And you start analyzing yourself and your life. What brainwave pattern did you just move into? Beta, would you agree? And you're moving away from the operating system where true change takes place. So what if then you noticed you were getting a little vigilant or getting a little impatient, and you became aware that you were doing that, and you realized that was the body as the mind being conditioned the wrong way, and you settled the body back down into the present moment, and you surrendered back into possibility. Would you agree that every time you did that, you were tempering the body and training the body and reconditioning the body to a new mind and liberating energy? And we've measured this over and over again. Don't think that when you're sitting there and your body is raging and it's telling you, you can't, it's too hard, I want to quit, I can't do this, and you're sitting there and you're observing those thoughts and you're not putting your attention behind them, don't think that you are not in the process of change. Because every time you overcome just that one thought, you are no longer firing and wiring the same circuits in your brain, and you are no longer emotionally signaling the same genes in the same way, and you're liberating energy, and the body's being freed from the chains of the past. So the flow of consciousness then, the movement of consciousness, is moving out of the thinking brain, the neocortex, and closer into the limbic brain, where those subconscious and autonomic functions begin to take place. And I'll show you what it looks like when we measured autonomic changes tomorrow. So our groove then is to go from beta to what? And we would call that alpha 2 and theta 2. And we could say then that beta and alpha represent the conscious mind, and alpha, theta, and delta represent the subconscious mind. How many people are with me? Poke the person next to you, please. Gamma superconsciousness, it doesn't fit in that model. Now, take a look at this. When you're living by the hormones of stress, you produce very incoherent brainwave patterns because different compartments are not working together because it's not a time to communicate. It's time for emergency. And when you measure those brainwave patterns, they're very incoherent. When you begin to connect to source, when you truly allow that consciousness, your subjective free-willed consciousness, to merge with that objective consciousness, which is a loving intelligence and intelligent love, and you begin to merge with it, different compartments of your brain that were once divided begin to work together and synchronize. And when that occurs, you start to feel whole, you start to feel more love for your life, you feel more spontaneous, more poised, you feel clear, you trust in the universe because your brain is now functioning in a holistic state. And as I said last night, all of those people that had spontaneous remissions that we measured over and over again, they reached a point where they were so whole and so happy with themselves and their life, they could care less if they had the disease, is the moment the disease went away. So here you go. When you perceive a threat from your external environment, you begin to recognize that that's a predator. Your association centers in your brain, through your frontal lobe, sends a signal to the limbic brain. The limbic brain then sends an electrical signal down the central nervous system that begins to activate the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands begin to squirt out adrenaline. Once the adrenaline is released, it becomes liquid energy, and your body begins to physiologically change. You get a rush of energy, your pupils dilate because you want to see what's going on in your external environment. Your salivary juices shut off, it's not a time to eat dinner. Your heart rate increases, your respiratory rate increases, and blood is sent to your extremities, and you're prepared for an emergency, and your body's knocked out of balance. But it doesn't have to be a lion. It could be your mother-in-law. And the same exact thing would happen because of some past experiences. Now you're reacting as if your mother-in-law is a predator. And you produce the same chemical reaction unconsciously, and you will use your mother-in-law to reaffirm your addiction to judgment, to envy, to hatred, to whatever it is emotionally. And you turn on that fight or flight nervous system, and you're knocking yourself out of balance. And when those chemicals are running, there'll always be a gap between the way things appear and the way things really are. And if you act during that refractory period, you'll always say the same thing. I should have never said that. I should have never done that. I should have never thought that. I should have never sent that nasty email. Because you were altered in that state. How many people are with me? My staff calls it, when they get the emails, she took the poison. Now, you don't even have to see your mother-in-law. What? I don't know what happened there. So there's another nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's a nervous system of relaxation. This is when your body goes into growth and repair, into long-term building projects. And in that state, all the energy now is being used for restoration and health. So if 70% of the time, for most people that are living in the emergency mode, they don't have a lot of energy for healing. How many people understand? So we live in two states of mind, right? The animal part of us, who's living in survival, will always live in stress. They'll be in contraction. There'll be tissue breakdown. They'll be degenerating. They'll feel fear or anger or sadness. They'll become selfish. They'll put their attention on the body, the environment, and time. Energy is always lost in survival. The person is living in emergency mode. They become very object-focused. They focus on the particle. They focus on matter. They focus on things because they're using their senses to define reality. They feel separate from possibility. They're determining reality by their senses. They're living by cause and effect. They're only seeing limited possibilities because they're projecting the future from the past. The brain is very incoherent, and they'll always focus on the knowns. Our divine nature, then, who we really are, is when we're in the creative state. The body is in homeostasis. Instead of contraction, there's expansion. Instead of catabolism or tissue breakdown, there's anabolism, tissue repair. There's health, there's order, there's regeneration. The emotions of love, joy, trust, knowingness, gratitude, heartfelt emotions tend to create more balanced states. The person goes from selfish to selfless. They become no thing, no body, no time. Energy is always generated in the system because they're connected to source. There's growth and repair. Their focus goes from narrow focus to a very broad and open focus. They see possibilities. They're not defining reality by their senses. They're beyond their senses. They're causing an effect instead of living by effect. Their brain is very coherent, and they love the unknown, and they embrace adventure. Now, learning is making new synaptic connections. Every time you learn something new, this happens in your brain. You have a physical change as a result of your interaction in your environment, and that is called learning. If you learned anything this week at all, and you're able to repeat it, you have a physical change in your brain, and you are not the same person that arrived. One whole network of neurons connecting with a whole other network of neurons, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole in the brain. You have a clear understanding, and you are enlightened. This is change, unhooking from the old self, reconnecting to the new self. This is real time, by the way. This is a new experience, jungles of neurons organizing themselves into networks to reflect the event in the external environment, and the brain begins to upscale its hardware. How many people are with me? It happens faster. I've slowed it down a little. Real time. Now, if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. Once those connections are now formed, you have a long-term relationship. And if you keep firing and you keep wiring, those nerve cells, just like any relationship, are bonded because they've communicated over and over again. How many people are with me? Now, this could be joy, it could be pain, it could be how to drive a stick shift, it could be how to complain. They're fired and wired. Now, your frontal lobe is your creative center. It's where you demonstrate free will. This is the boss, the CEO. This is where you learn. This is where you have intention. This is where you invent. This is where you have attention. This is where you speculate possibilities. This is where you decide on your actions and make decisions. You control your behavior. You have focused concentration, and you restrain your emotional reactions. It's 40% of your entire brain, and that's what separates us from all other species on the planet. And when you're sitting in a meditation, this is the part of your brain that should be lighting up, because you are no longer allowing yourself to run as an automatic program. Now, let's just say when you're truly focused and you're truly paying attention, the frontal lobe acts like a volume control. And what it loves to do, like a great symphony leader, when you're paying attention to a single-minded thought, the frontal lobe doesn't want to be distracted by anything else. And because it has connections to all other parts of the brain, when you are sitting in meditation and you are putting your attention on your inner world, it begins to silence the circuits in your motor cortex, and you become very still. It shuts the lights out in the sensory centers, and you no longer feel your body. And if there's no brain activity in the sensory centers, then you are no body. It cools off the circuits in the parietal lobe, in the orienting area, and all of a sudden you lose track of time and space. It shuts off the visual cortex. You no longer see anything with your eyes. It turns off the lights in the association centers. You're no longer an identity. And it begins to temper those emotions in the limbic brain. And the moment that occurs, the thought that you're thinking literally is the experience in your mind. And the brain upscales itself to reflect the thought as the experience. And you begin to change biologically. How many people are with me? 2 more slides or so and I'm done. This is when you begin to speculate, what is compassion? Well, I listened to one of my teachers. They told me what compassion was. I read the book. I saw the video. And you begin to ask, what is compassion? The frontal lobe then begins to call up different networks of neurons that you've either learned or experienced in your life. So what is compassion? The frontal lobe then begins to call up a neurological network because you read a book. Once you begin to think about the book, then you thought, well, my Aunt Mary was pretty compassionate. I remember her. Oh, yeah, I saw the video with the Dalai Lama on compassion. He's a pretty compassionate guy. Oh, I had that experience in my life where I felt compassion. Ooh, boy, do I have a lot of compassion for myself. And the moment you turn on all those circuits, you produce an internal representation, and that's called an intention, and you get a picture in your mind. And the clearer you are, and the more you learn, the more you can refine that picture. So then, if nerve cells that fire together wire together, then nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. It's called the universal law. Use it or lose it. I call this the science of changing your mind or throwing out the mental trash. Here you go. You're going to think a new thought called, I am healthy, I am happy, I'm in love with life. You're going to signal a new set of neurons in your brain, and you're going to activate a new network of neurons. And it's going to be this blue neuron right here. You with me? So this is the new thought. You're going to say, I am compassionate, or I am happy, or I am joyful, or I'm in love with life. You close your eyes, you begin the internal process, and you begin to fire that thought. But there's only one problem. You know what it is? You got all these other circuits firing at the same time. And in the midst of you firing this new thought called I am happy, or I am joyful, or I'm compassionate, you got all these other voices going on saying, you're not very happy, you're a loser. You're too much like your mother. You'll never change. Look at you. You're failing miserably here. And what about the pain in your back? All of those voices are old circuits firing and wiring in your brain. Are you with me? Now, we have this amazing faculty as human beings. It's our will. And our will is connected to our spirit. And if you keep firing that thought over and over again, and you keep firing it, and you keep insisting that that is the thought you want in the front and center stage of your mind, and you keep doing it, this will become the loudest voice and the loudest signal in your brain. And the moment this is the loudest signal in your brain, you have the nerve impulse firing down this way, but you have the glue that keeps the neurons connected firing in the opposite direction. So watch. You keep firing the thought, and all of a sudden, this becomes the loudest thought in your mind, and watch what happens. Boom. Now, this thought, I am joyful, or I am compassionate, is louder than these other voices. And because this is the strongest signal, now the nerve cell has to wire to this one and glue itself together. But there's only a certain amount of glue to go around. So it starts to steal the glue from the neighboring circuits to connect this circuit. And as it begins to connect this circuit, it begins to disconnect the other circuits because you're no longer paying attention to those thoughts. And so then as you begin to fire and wire this circuit, there goes the voice that you're too much like your mother. There goes the voice that you have pain in your back. There's the voice that you'll never change. And all of a sudden, the only signal that's traveling to this neuron is called joy. And we call this pruning in neuroscience, and this is exactly what happens in transformation. Now think about this. Where every neuron is connected to another neuron is called a memory. If those circuits are pruned apart, then the memory of the old self literally no longer exists. And where is that memory stored? In the soul is wisdom. And that's the name of the game. So here's the question. Can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the experience has already occurred? It's absolutely possible. And can you emotionally embrace a future potential that already exists in the quantum field so many times that your body, as the unconscious mind, begins to believe it's living in that future in the present moment, and you're conditioning your body to signal new genes in new ways so that your body begins to change to look like the experience has already occurred? Absolutely. So think about this. If so, your brain and body are physically changed ahead of the actual experience. You just move from living in your past to living in your future. In fact, you are ahead of your time. And when you successfully apply this new paradigm, your brain and body are no longer a record of the past, but now, in fact, a map to the future. And to live by this law is to live by the quantum law. And the quantum law says your environment is an extension of your mind. And if you truly change your mind, there should be evidence in your life. How many people understand? Last slide, some simple instructions on how to handle change in your life on your message machine on your cell phone or your recording. I'm not available right now, but thank you for caring enough to call. I'm making some changes in my life. Please leave a message after the beep. If I don't return your call, you are one of the changes. Thanks for listening.